water tank body. In February 2013, guests staying at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles began complaining about the water. Some said it tasted bitter. Others noticed a strange smell. A few reported dark particles floating in their glasses. Management blamed aging pipes, explaining that the historic building had plumbing issues before. One guest even posted online that the water looked thick, but the comment was largely ignored. Days later, water pressure throughout the building suddenly dropped, prompting maintenance workers to climb onto the roof to inspect the storage tanks. When one worker opened the heavy metal lid of one tank on February 19th, he immediately recoiled. Inside was the decomposing body of 21-year-old Canadian student Elisa Lam. She had been reported missing weeks earlier after behaving strangely in an elevator security video that later went viral. Investigators determined she had accessed the roof through a fire escape, climbed into the water tank, and drowned. The lid had closed above her. For nearly 3 weeks, hotel guests had been drinking, bathing, and brushing their teeth with contaminated water. What seemed like routine plumbing complaints were the first signs of a body hidden above them. Sealed ward. In the late 20th century, several aging hospitals in Eastern Europe underwent renovations after decades of political and administrative changes. In one Romanian facility that had operated through tuberculosis outbreaks in the 1960s, workers reopening a sealed wing in 1989 discovered hospital beds, rusted equipment, and patient belongings left untouched for years. Records later showed that during a severe infectious outbreak, certain wards had been quarantined and then permanently closed when funding and staffing collapsed. Patients suffering from advanced disease had died inside during isolation periods, and after staff rotations and administrative turnover, documentation was poorly transferred. The wing remained sealed, effectively forgotten for decades. What later rumors described as a mysterious locked room with abandoned patients was rooted in mismanagement and chaotic public health systems during a time when resources were limited and oversight was inconsistent. Wall Watcher. In 2012, tenants at an apartment complex in Minnesota began noticing unusual details inside their units. Some felt as though they were being watched. Others heard faint scratching noises behind walls late at night. Maintenance initially blamed rodents. Suspicion grew when a resident repainting a bedroom noticed a perfectly cut circular hole hidden near an air vent. Additional tenants discovered similar openings concealed behind electrical plates and furniture, each positioned toward beds or bathrooms. Police obtained a warrant and searched the apartment of a quiet long-term resident named Michael McCormick. Behind his drywall, officers found narrow crawl spaces he had carved between units. He had reinforced the openings and created concealed viewing points that allowed him to observe neighbors without entering their apartments. Inside the hidden spaces were notebooks documenting residents' daily routines, work schedules, and private habits. He had not broken doors or windows. He had moved silently between walls, exploiting the building's structure itself. The Lipstick Killer. In 1945 and 1946, Chicago was shaken by a series of brutal murders. A 43-year-old woman named Josephine Ross was found stabbed in her apartment. Months later, 6-year-old Suzanne Dagnon was kidnapped from her bedroom and later found dismembered. In January 1946, another victim, Frances Brown, was discovered murdered in her apartment. Written in lipstick on the wall near her body were the words, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." The press quickly labeled the unknown attacker the Lipstick Killer. Police eventually arrested 17-year-old William Hearns after linking him through fingerprints found at the scenes. He later confessed during interrogation, though debates about the circumstances of that confession continue. The message written in lipstick became one of the most infamous crime scene details in American history, the Killer Clown. Between 1972 and 1978, teenage boys and young men began disappearing in suburban Chicago, Illinois. Many were last seen after mentioning a job opportunity with a local contractor. That contractor was John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was known in his community as a friendly businessman and active volunteer. He even performed at local events dressed as Pogo the Clown, entertaining children at parties and charity functions. To neighbors, he seemed outgoing and helpful, someone deeply involved in civic life. In December 1978, police began investigating him in connection with the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Peast. As suspicions grew, officers obtained a search warrant for Gacy's home in Norwood Park. What they found beneath the house shocked the nation. Inside the crawl space under the floorboards, investigators uncovered human remains buried in the dirt. As the excavation continued, more bodies were discovered. In total, 33 victims were eventually linked to Gacy. Many had been lured to his home with promises of construction work. Once inside, they were restrained, assaulted, and murdered. Some bodies were buried under the house, while others were disposed of in nearby waterways. Gacy was arrested, convicted in 1980, and later executed in 1994. His case remains one of the most notorious serial murder investigations in U.S. history, a reminder of how easily evil can hide behind a smiling mask. The Green Man. For decades, drivers in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, whispered about a figure who walked the empty highways at night. They called him the Green Man. Some knew him as Charlie No-Face. Teenagers would drive along State Route 351 hoping to see him appear in their headlights. The legend was real, but not in the way people imagined. His name was Raymond Robinson. In 1919, when he was 8 years old, he climbed near Morado Bridge to look at a bird's nest. He accidentally touched a 22,000-volt power line. The electric shock left him severely disfigured, costing him his eyes, nose, and one arm. Local newspapers documented the accident. As he grew older, Robinson chose to avoid going out during the day because his appearance frightened people. He spent his time crafting leather belts and wallets at home. At night, when the roads were quiet, he took long, solitary walks between Coppell and New Galilee. When car headlights hit his scarred skin, it sometimes reflected with a faint, greenish glow. Rumors spread. The story grew darker with each retelling, but those who stopped to speak with him described him as polite and kind. Some locals even brought him cigarettes and talked with him along the roadside. Raymond Robinson continued his nightly walks until his death in 1985. What began as a tragic childhood accident slowly transformed into one of Pennsylvania's most enduring roadside legends. Not about a monster, but about a man misunderstood by the dark. The Snuff Film. In 1985, authorities in rural California searched a remote cabin property connected to Leonard Lake. Inside the residence and surrounding land, investigators uncovered human remains buried in shallow graves. They also found videotapes recorded by Lake and his accomplice, Charles Ng, documenting the captivity and abuse of victims. For years, rumors had circulated about commercial snuff films being sold underground. While no evidence of a widespread industry was proven, the tapes recovered from the property confirmed that real murders had been recorded for personal use. The discovery blurred the line between urban myth and documented criminal evidence. The poisoned Tylenol. In September 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman of Elk Grove Village, Illinois, took an extra-strength Tylenol capsule for a cold and died hours later. Within days, 6 more people in the Chicago area died after taking capsules from store shelves. Investigators discovered that someone had tampered with bottles of Tylenol, lacing the capsules with potassium cyanide and returning them to retail stores. The case, now known as the Chicago Tylenol murders, triggered nationwide panic. Johnson & Johnson recalled over 31 million bottles, and tamper-evident packaging became an industry standard across the United States. The person responsible was never definitively convicted for the poisonings, but the incident permanently changed consumer safety regulations and pharmaceutical packaging worldwide.